I'm Abigail Matthews, 32, and for most of my life I've lived in the shadow of my older sister Hannah, 5 years my senior. She's always been the golden child, the one our parents praised, the one they invested in, the one who always took center stage. To them, I was the quiet, dependable one, the one who didn't ask for much. What they didn't know, what no one in my family knew, was that I had become the youngest judge appointed to our district court in 50 years. While they thought I was just an admin assistant, I had built a career based on hard work, long nights, and an unwavering sense of justice. But I never corrected them. When my aunt called me a secretary, when Hannah made sly comments about me filing papers, I let it slide. I told myself I didn't need validation from a family that never really saw me, but the truth? Part of me still wanted them to notice, to be proud, to say, "We see you." The charade lasted 3 years, until Hannah's engagement party. I showed up early, helped my mom set up flowers, and nodded along as my dad adjusted lights under Hannah's demanding instructions. The whole event was a performance, just like always. Hannah arrived in a sleek black BMW, flaunting her fiancé Nathan like a trophy. Nathan was a defense attorney, someone I'd seen before, in my courtroom, but of course, he didn't recognize me. Not yet. Hannah made sure to mock me subtly all evening. "Abby's still doing admin work at some courthouse," she told guests. I smiled politely, sipped champagne, and endured the jabs. My cousin Jessica, one of the few who knew the truth, whispered, "You could end this whole charade right now." But I wasn't ready yet. Then came dinner. And Hannah's final jab. In front of everyone, she laughed and said, "Not everyone's built for high-pressure careers. Some of us are better in supporting roles, like Abby." The table went silent. And that's when Nathan looked at me. Looked hard. Recognition dawning. "Wait," he said. "You're the judge?" Everything stopped. The fork Hannah held hovered mid-air. And I smiled for the first time that night. "Yes," I said clearly. "Judge Abigail Matthews." "Judge Abigail Matthews." Nathan's voice broke the silence like glass. Every eye at the table turned toward me. My father coughed awkwardly. My mother blinked, as if she misheard. A few guests exchanged confused glances. Hannah just froze. You could practically hear her ego cracking. "Yes," I said again, more firmly this time. "I was appointed 2.5 years ago. District Court, Division 3. Nathan leaned back slowly. "You oversaw the Morris case last year." I nodded. "And the Kelly arbitration. And most recently, the Ridgeway criminal proceedings." He looked stunned. "You ruled against our firm in Ridgeway." I sipped my champagne calmly. "The law ruled against your firm. I just enforced it." The entire table burst into nervous laughter. Except for Hannah. Her jaw clenched. Her eyes narrowed like she wanted to rewind time and bite her tongue. But it was too late. The truth was out. The silence turned into whispers. I thought she was just an assistant. "She's a judge?" Wait, how did no one know? Finally, my mother found her voice. "Why didn't you ever tell us?" I met her gaze. "Because every time I tried to share something, you changed the subject to Hannah, or told me I was exaggerating. So I stopped trying." Dad cleared his throat. "But a judge?" "Appointed by the governor," I said. "After years of clerking, private litigation, and passing the bar on my first try." More whispers. More shifting. But I didn't need to prove anything else. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like the supporting role. I felt like the woman who had quietly, steadily built something powerful. Not for attention, but because it mattered. And watching Hannah stew in her own bitterness, that was just a bonus. Hannah's smile was frozen. That kind of brittle, pageant-perfect smile she'd mastered since we were kids. But now, the cracks were showing. She cleared her throat and forced a laugh. "Well, I guess little Abby was hiding more than I thought." The table chuckled politely. A few guests gave her a look. That forced compliment tone wasn't landing like it used to. I tilted my head. "I wasn't hiding, Hannah. I was just never asked." Silence. Then, like clockwork, she went on the offensive. "Well, I'm sure it's a good start. District court is, a stepping stone. Nathan flinched. She kept talking. And I suppose if you're happy with that kind of workload, then that's great. It's not like everyone wants to be in front of cameras or take high-stakes federal litigation. Right, babe? She looked at Nathan for backup. He didn't say a word. In fact, he looked at her the way someone looks at a painting they suddenly realize is a fake. The lines didn't add up anymore. Actually, he said slowly, district court judges carry immense authority. The Ridgway case had national attention. Hannah's face flushed. Well, I didn't mean, I was just saying. You were minimizing your sister, he said bluntly. It was the first time I'd ever seen someone publicly check her like that. And it wasn't me. It was her own fiancé. The table was dead silent. I almost felt bad. But then I remembered every time she called me plain. Every time she referred to my work as paper pushing. Every family dinner where she dominated the conversation while I sat smiling through the sting. No, I didn't feel bad. I felt free. Hannah wasn't the queen of the room anymore. She was just another guest. And I was finally standing where I belonged. After dinner, the crowd began to thin. People murmured congratulations to me in hushed, surprised tones, like I'd suddenly become visible. Even the servers looked at me differently. But the moment I stepped outside onto the patio for air, I felt the tension return. Mom and Dad followed me. Mom clutched her pearls. Always her nervous tick. Dad stood with his hands behind his back like he was about to lecture a student. Abigail, Mom began, voice soft. We had no idea. That much is clear, I said calmly. We're just shocked, Dad added. You've always been so quiet about your work. I turned to face them. No. You've always been too loud about Hannah's. They both blinked. For years, I continued. Every time I tried to share something, about law school, my clerkships, even my appointment, you brushed it aside. Changed the subject. Asked about Hannah's next trip, her next promotion, her next boyfriend. That's not fair, Mom whispered. Isn't it? I asked. When I passed the bar, I called you. You said, oh, sweetie, Hannah just got a raise. When I got my first job at the firm, you said, don't work too hard, Abby. You'll never be Hannah. Dad frowned. We were just trying to motivate you. No, I said. You were trying to mold me into someone I was never meant to be. Someone quieter, smaller, less threatening to your golden child. They didn't deny it, and that told me everything. I took a breath, not out of anger, but relief, because finally I was saying it. I'm not angry, I said. I'm just done chasing validation you were never willing to give. Mom's eyes welled with tears. Dad looked away. For once, I didn't rush to comfort them. This wasn't their moment. It was mine. I turned to leave, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the forgotten daughter. I felt like the one who remembered who she was. The party was over. Guests had gone. The lights were dimmed, and I was grabbing my coat when I heard footsteps behind me. Abby, wait. It was Hannah, still in heels, but no longer in performance mode. Her lipstick faded, hair slightly messy, voice lower than usual. She closed the door behind her and stepped into the hallway. I didn't mean to humiliate you tonight. I raised an eyebrow. Didn't you? She sighed. Okay, maybe I was a little harsh, but you have to understand, you caught me off guard. I mean, Judge? You could have told someone. I tried, I said. You just never cared to ask. She ignored that. It's just... This was supposed to be my night, Abby. My engagement. And then suddenly, everyone's talking about you. About how impressive you are. How quiet and smart you've always been. It felt like you stole it from me. I laughed. Quiet. Bitter. Stole it? Hannah, I didn't steal anything. I earned this life one night class, one court motion, one lonely hour at a time while you dismissed me like I was invisible. She crossed her arms. You always act so above it all, like you don't care what people think. But clearly you do, or you wouldn't have dropped your little judge bomb at my party. I looked her in the eye. I didn't drop anything. Nathan recognized me. I just confirmed the truth. Silence stretched between us. Then, soft but sharp, she added, I guess I should say congratulations. You don't have to, I replied. I didn't come here for your approval. Her mouth opened, closed. She looked at me like she was seeing me, truly, for the first time. And maybe that was the scariest thing for her. Not that I had succeeded, but that I'd done it without needing her, without needing any of them. Monday morning, the courtroom smelled like old wood and fresh coffee, just like always. The bailiff nodded at me as I entered. Morning, Your Honor, I smiled. Morning, Derek. I slipped into my robe, straightened the papers on the bench, and took a deep breath. No flashing cameras, no applause, just responsibility, just truth. This was where I belonged. Not in some country club banquet hall, but here, in the place where voices mattered, and justice wasn't about ego, but fairness. As the courtroom settled, I glanced at the docket and froze. Case number 2209B. People versus Langston. Langston, as in Karen Langston, a former high school classmate, one of Hannah's old besties, a woman who used to snicker behind her hand whenever I spoke, who once called me Hannah's awkward little sister in front of the entire student council. She didn't recognize me as she entered. Not until the clerk announced, presiding today, the Honorable Judge Abigail Matthews. Her face drained of color. She blinked, mouth slightly open. For a second I thought she'd faint. I looked directly at her. Calm, professional, not a flicker of smugness, just peace. Because I didn't need revenge. This wasn't personal. It was justice. She stammered through her testimony. Her lawyer did most of the work. I maintained my composure, my impartiality, and my dignity. And as the hearing ended, she hesitated, then whispered as she passed my bench, I didn't know. You've changed. I nodded once. No, I just stopped hiding. And just like that, the power shifted again. Not because I had risen, but because I had rooted. In truth, in patience, in the quiet strength of knowing who I am, no matter who sees it. It started with an email. Subject line, Feature Request, Women in Justice Series. A local journalist, known for spotlighting powerful women in law, wanted to interview me. She wrote, We've followed your career from behind the scenes, but after the recent Ridgway ruling, you've earned more than just respect in legal circles. You've become a symbol of quiet leadership. We'd love to feature you. I stared at the screen for a long time. For years I had kept my head down. I let Hannah shine. I let my parents ignore me. I told myself I didn't need the spotlight. And maybe I didn't. But maybe it wasn't about needing the spotlight. Maybe it was about stepping into it, so others like me would stop hiding. I thought about that moment at the engagement party, how my truth had shattered years of assumptions in 5 seconds, and how it wasn't the title that had changed things. It was my voice. Still, I hesitated. What would people think? Would it look like I was finally seeking attention? Then I remembered something Hannah once told me, smug and cruel. Some people just weren't built to lead. And that's when I clicked reply. I'd be honored to participate. Thank you for seeing me. 2 weeks later, the article was published. From Overlooked to Unshakable, Judge Abigail Matthews on Justice, Family, and Finding Her Voice. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't vengeful. It was honest. I didn't name names. I didn't air family drama. I just told the truth. About work, about perseverance, about what it means to rise without applause. And for the first time, I wasn't just known in a courtroom. I was respected beyond it, not because I demanded it, but because I had finally stopped apologizing for being powerful. The article went live on a Tuesday morning. By noon, it was trending locally. By that evening, my inbox had over 200 new messages, from law students, local attorneys, and even a few women who said, I saw myself in your story. But the messages that mattered most didn't come. Not from Mom, not from Dad, not from Hannah, not a word, not a text, not even the passive-aggressive, nice article from my mother. It was radio silence. Until Thursday. That's when Hannah posted a vague status on social media. Some people wait their whole lives for a spotlight. just to finally feel important. Funny how success is louder when it's unexpected. No tags, no names, but everyone knew. The comments were full of fake sympathy and not-so-subtle digs. "You're the real star, babe. Let people talk. You've always been the accomplished one. Anyone can look powerful in print." I didn't respond. I didn't need to, because for the first time, they were reacting to me, not to something I'd done to provoke them, not to a favor I failed to give, not to a role I didn't play right, but to who I had become, publicly, unapologetically, and without their permission. Jack, my former professor and now mentor, sent me a message that simply said, "The people who ignored you when you were quiet will resent you when you finally speak. That's not your burden. That's their reckoning." And he was right. Hannah's anger wasn't about my success. It was about the fact that I didn't need her praise anymore. The silence from my parents? It wasn't confusion. It was discomfort, because the version of me they had built in their minds no longer existed. And this one? This one didn't shrink for anyone. 3 days after the article, I got a phone call. Not a text, not an email, a real call from Dad. I stared at the screen for a good 10 seconds before answering. "Hello?" There was a pause. Then his voice, lower than usual, not the firm tone of lectures or dinner table corrections. Just a man, unsure of his place. "Hi, Abigail. I read the article." I waited. "I didn't realize how much we missed," he continued. "I mean, I knew you were doing well, but I guess I never really asked what that meant." I sat down slowly. He sighed. "You were always so independent. We thought you didn't need attention, that you didn't want it." "I didn't need attention," I said softly. "I needed acknowledgement." Another pause. "Your mom's been quiet since it came out," he added. "I think she doesn't know what to say." I said nothing. Then he said it. The words I never expected from the man who had always applauded Hannah's every step and only nodded at mine. "We were wrong. About how we treated you. About how much we assumed." It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a tearful apology. But it was real. And it was enough. "I'm proud of you," he said, voice cracking slightly. "Not because of the article. Not because of the robe or the gavel, but because you didn't let being ignored stop you from becoming this." Tears welled in my eyes. But I didn't let them fall. Because this wasn't a breakdown. It was a breakthrough. I whispered, "Thank you, Dad." And I meant it. Because sometimes healing doesn't come in grand gestures. It comes in a quiet voice finally saying, "I see you." A week later, I received an invitation. Hannah's bridal shower. Elegant font. Ivory cardstock. RSVP requested. I stared at it for a long time. It didn't come with a note. No apology, no acknowledgement. Just the assumption that I'd show up, play nice, smile politely, like I always used to. But that woman, she didn't live here anymore. For a moment I considered going, not to cause a scene, but to show I could rise above it. But then I realized something. I didn't owe them a performance. Not anymore. I folded the invitation neatly and placed it back in the envelope. Then I tucked it into a drawer and went on with my day. That evening I had dinner with friends. People who never once made me feel small. We laughed, toasted to little victories, and talked about everything from books to weekend hikes. No one asked me to prove my worth. They already saw it. I went home that night, poured a glass of wine, and stood by the window overlooking the city. The same city I had once felt invisible in. Now, I felt grounded, seen, free. The truth was, I didn't need Hannah's apology. I didn't need Mom's admiration. I didn't even need Dad's late realization. Because somewhere along the way, I had stopped building my life around people who only looked at me when I made noise. And I had started living for the version of me that never stopped believing I was enough, even when no one clapped. I didn't burn bridges. I just stopped walking across ones that only ever led me backward. I chose peace. I chose growth. I chose me. And for the first time in my life, that choice was mine to make and mine alone.